Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Project Football Podcast. In today's episode, we're going to be talking with a professional player and his path to becoming a pro. We'll be back right after this break. Today's episode is sponsored by Anchor Podcasts. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast, and it's free. Let me explain. There's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer, and Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. You can also make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Now let's get back into the episode. So, how's it going?
Yeah, good, thank you. I'm in France right now. There's quarantine going on, so there's just strict measures here, so doing what we can under the circumstances.
That's cool. So, in today's episode, we're just going to talk about, because you're playing professional football right now, right?
That's right.
So, we're just going to talk about your whole journey to becoming, going where you are right now.
For sure. Sounds great.
Okay, so let's start with where you were born and
sure.
How that.
And go from there. Sure. So I was born in Iran. I was born in the capital, Tehran, Iran. And then when I was 6 months old, my family migrated to Australia. So migrated to Australia, and everything kind of started from Australia.
So, how old were you when you migrated to Australia?
I was 6 months old. Yeah, so I was 6 months old when my family left. I visited a few times over the course of my life, for periods of like 1 month, 3 months, 2 or 3 times, and but majority of my life was in Australia until I started to leave for football opportunities for football, which we'll get into later on.
Okay, so you started off in Australia, and is that where you joined an academy, or did you start playing for a youth team? What happened in Australia?
Yeah, so I mean, from whenever my memory can go back, from the most it can go back, I was always playing football. So my first memory of football is playing for a local team in Australia. We moved to a small city called Newcastle, which is 2 hours away from Sydney, which is the closest major city to Newcastle. And I played for a small team. It was called Jesmond. It was just a small local club team. There was no, hopes for playing professionally from my family or anything like that. It was just okay, we're going to put our son into playing football. And that was my first memory of playing. And then I just carried on playing club football in Australia. I then grew up and ended up playing for a team called Hornsby RSL. At that time, it was the highest level you could play in Australia if you're under the age of... It was either you play senior football at a high level or you play club football. And so I just played with this team called Hornsby RSL. I was always a standout player in that league, in that team, always man of the match. And but still at that time, as much as I loved football, the opportunities weren't there in Australia at the time, so it wasn't on my mind to be exactly, okay, we're gonna play at Hornsby RSL, and then we're gonna do this and do that, and end up playing professional. It was just kind of, you could call it a hobby. I loved the game, so it was just fun, and I enjoyed being the best and scoring goals, and yeah.
So, do you remember if it was you who was pushing yourself, or did you have any other people who pushed you to encourage you to be better and play at the top level?
Yeah, so when I'm speaking about because right now I'm just referring to when I was about, from you could say 5 years old to about 14, 15. From that range, that age, it was all just for the love of the game. I didn't come from a footballing family. My father wasn't like a professional. I have an older brother. He played. He wasn't a professional either. He was a very good player, but he didn't have the opportunities to play professionally. So, at that youth level, it was just I enjoyed scoring goals. And, as you score more and more goals, there's higher expectations from your family and from yourself. So it just kind of became a habit week in, week out, just going, playing, scoring goals in training, scoring goals in games, and just going on from there. But as I started to understand, life more, my brain started to develop. I started to realize, okay, this is something I want to do. And yeah, there's even clips from when I was 3 years old, 4 years old from the camcorder. My father's like asking me, what do you want to do? And I was telling him, I want to go to the World Cup and score 8 goals and win the World Cup. And so now that I'm looking back, I can understand that, okay, that young boy did have ambitions to play professionally. He just didn't know it yet, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's pretty cool that you knew from like a very early age that you wanted to do this. So do you, like, as you were getting older, like you said, 14, 15, were you starting to look for trials and like play time with other clubs, or did they just come look for you? Like, how did that?
Yeah, for sure. So at the age of, we could say I probably started, understanding football from 3 years old, we could say. And then I think at 5 was the first year you're eligible in Australia to start playing for any form of like organized football for kids that age. So, I continued every year, and we could say that maybe at 9, 10, I started truly understanding and verbalizing the fact that I wanted to play professionally. I mean, at 3 years old, we have that clip and I love the game and everything. But at 10, I really understand, okay, this is what I want to continue and have as my profession. So I was playing, and I went for a trial at the age of 14. This was like, it was an academy. It was an academy trial that, not necessarily an academy, but it was like this regional team that would have showcase games. And I went for a trial. I trained all week with this team. They trained 4 times a week, so I trained all the week with them. And then at the end, it was a Friday, and I was supposed to go to the coach and speak to him about, what he thought about my trial. So I approached him, and honestly, when I look back now, if I was wearing the kit of the team, you would think I was in the team. I felt I did very well. If I was not standout, I had at least done enough to sign to that team. So then I approached him, and I was very optimistic, and I said, hey, so what do you think in regards to my situation? And he said, I don't think you're good. And he just walked away. So I tried to shake his hand, nothing. He just said, I don't think you're good. And he walked away. And as soon as that happened, so ended up changing, going to the dressing room, getting my stuff, going to the car. My mother was with me then, and it was about a 2.5 hour drive. So my mother had drove me 2.5 hours there and back that whole week. So on the drive back, I was just, to be honest, I was just crying, bawling my eyes out, like just crushed dream feeling. And then that next morning, and to be honest, I cannot tell you how, but something clicked in my head, and it was like, okay, I'm gonna make it. It turned into an obsession that not necessarily I'm gonna prove this person wrong, but I'm gonna make it. And from the ages of 14 to 16, or 14 to 17, I just became obsessed. And I started training 6 to 8 hours a day, every single day. I didn't take a day off. I would wake up at 5 a.m. before school. I would run 1 hour. I would do dribbling 1 hour in my basement. And then I would go to school. I would train during school. I would train after school. And then I had team training in the evening with my club team. And that 2-3 years was what really changed everything. You could say from turning from an amateur to a pro. I would put it all, I mean, there's credit in so many different places, but I think that 2-3 years was something that really fine-tuned my ability, technically, tactically, and especially, I would say, mentally as well.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I've heard lots of players who've had experiences with like getting declined by teams and coaches, and then that experience like actually pushes them to move on in their career and like realize that you can't just show up to any trial and they're gonna accept you. Like you have to really stand
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, exactly. I mean,
out.
it was I mean, now looking back, it was for the best, because who knows, maybe if I had signed, maybe I would have become complacent, and I wouldn't have had that 2-3 years of vigorous training. I mean, I was always training, but that 2-3 years put me at a different level to my competition. I think the ages of, I always tell young players now that seek advice from me, I say the ages of 14 to 18 are the most dangerous years for an up-and-coming footballer, because those are the years where money comes into play. You can start getting a job, girls, partying, alcohol, drugs, social media becomes, you start to care more about your attention and how you look and how you dress and how people perceive you. And it's that fine line between, for a footballer, it's that fine line between you either make it or you don't, is during those years. And I mean, luckily for me, I spent those years just sacrificing everything and, and just dedicating dedicating my life basically to my dream and my craft, and it worked out for the best.
That's a really cool story.
Yeah.
So, moving on, what is your first experience with a professional club or like youth?
Yeah, so I went on a trial in the United States with a team called Seattle Sounders. I went on a trial with their second team. It was S2, Seattle Sounders 2. They've now rebranded to Tacoma Defiance in recent years, but at the time when I went on the trial, it was for Seattle Sounders 2. I went on a trial, and during that trial, one of the scouts was the coach of the under-18 academy team. So, so basically during that trial, he saw me, he was interested, and he asked me to come Monday to join them. So my first professional experience, you could say, with a professional organization was Seattle Sounders Under-18 Academy. So I spent some time with them, and then following that, I went to the Seattle Sounders Under-23 team the following season, and that was my first proper experience with a professional organization.
So would you say you had a good experience in the MLS and in that Seattle Sounders too? Like, did you feel like you had enough exposure to higher level teams when you were playing the game?
Absolutely. I mean, when I was with them, I had some trouble getting a lot of game time and things like that. I got no game time with the senior team. I mean, as you know, in the MLS, the academies and in the United States, from the academy to the second team to the third team, it's not like Europe where it's one organization where you can just pop a player to go there and pop a player to come down and fluctuate like that. You basically belong to one team and one team only. And if you want to go somewhere else, there's a different form of there's a different contractual agreement that needs to be made. So it's not like you can have a player that's okay, he's doing well, let's give him a couple minutes with the first team in an MLS game and see how he's doing. It wasn't exactly like that. So I got game time with the teams I was at. I played friendlies, league games, and trying to show myself. With the under-23 team, it was a bit more difficult because I was 18 years old at the time, or 17, 18 years old at the time, and fighting players that were, much older. They were like draft prospects in the United States for the MLS draft and things like that. So it was a bit of a battle, but I had a phenomenal experience, and still to this day, the fact that I was with Seattle Sounders plays a big part in my not only in my development, but also in my CV and having a good, reputable club on my playing history that now has, I believe, 2 MLS Cups to their name.
Okay, so would you say when you were playing at the Seattle Sounders U23 and U18, would you say that you were training as hard as you were when you were a little bit younger, like 14 to up to 18? Like,
right.
Were you still training on your own?
Yeah, it's a good question. So that's something I realized when I joined Seattle. I realized the importance of efficient training and training hard versus training smart. Because when I was training 6 to 8 hours, I mean, I was training well. It wasn't like I was out at the park trying to hit top bins or whatever like that. I was really training, hard in the gym, on the pitch, doing finishing. I was trying to do what I thought was best. And even though it was very good for me, I would also say that it could have been more efficient and more position specific, So when I went to Seattle, what really changed for me was understanding that football is not just dribbling and shooting. Football has a tactical element, nutritional element, a mental element, has a technical, physical. It's such a complex sport. And that's what I realized at Seattle, because my training kind of simmered down. It became more organized and efficient. And it was more training smart than training hard. I was still doing my own individual training. I was still doing, my gym work with the team, my gym work by myself. I was still doing team training and my individual training, but it wasn't as vigorous as 6 to 8 hours of just you could say grind. When I went to Seattle, it was more being professional and training smart versus training hard.
Okay, well, when you're talking about that, you mentioned positional training, like training for your position, but I forgot to ask you your position.
No problem. I'm a striker, number 9. Yeah.
Okay. So have you striker your whole life, or has that switched around?
Yeah. So I've been always a striker. My father was growing up. My father was always focused on goals. And that was it. And that kind of stuck in my head still to this day, when I would score, I was happy. I felt happy all week. And when I wouldn't score, I felt like something was missing and something was wrong. And, I always got great validation from people around me when I would score. And I was always a striker. Though at times people saw different things in me. They saw different qualities in me. So, for example, while I was at Seattle, they tried me at center mid for a season. I wasn't playing striker. I couldn't focus on my goals as much, but it was good because I was able to develop technically during that period and understand the game in a different way. But no matter what happened, I would always come back to playing as a striker, where I believe I deserve to be. Yeah.
Okay, so after you finished with the Seattle Sounders U18 and you moved up to the U23, what club did you sign after that?
Sure. So while I was at when I finished my time at the under-18s and I went to the under-23s, I was still at an age where in the United States you have to make a decision of following the university process, the NCAA process, or you go and just try to figure it out yourself. So majority of the time, the players that try to figure it out themselves, it doesn't work. So what I did was, you could call it arrogant at the time or selfish or whatnot, but I just I had a strong belief in myself. I had a strong belief in my ability, and there was a few very good people around me that had the same belief in me that kind of agreed with my goal of playing professional as soon as possible, and they helped push me to move on. So my coach at the under-23s at the time, Mr. Darren Zawatsky, he was a big part in my I would say one of the biggest part in my development. Speaking from a football figure, he pushed me to go on to an agent that he knew very well, and I signed with that agent. And through that agent, I got my first opportunity abroad, where I went to Sportclub Hanau 1960. It's a German club, so I went over there for a trial, and I was supposed to trial for a week, but after the first day, I signed with the club. And that was in a small town called Hanau in Germany, which is about 20-30 minutes from Frankfurt.
Okay, so that's pretty cool. Yeah. Would you say that for younger players who are looking to get these opportunities in different countries and like smaller professional teams, would you say that signing for an agent, like as when they're younger, is a good idea, or like trying to reach out to other people, make these connections?
Right. So personally speaking, from my experience, I always felt that, I had a deep belief within me that I knew I was going to make it. And when I was weighing my options, I had offers from good, reputable schools, Division 1, Division 2, NAIA. I had very good options at hand, but I knew deep within that, I could play professionally. Maybe not at the top of the top, but I could have I could open the door, I could get my foot in the door. So what I would recommend to young players is looking, having someone that can really advise them and look at their ability and see if this player is going to benefit more from going into university, spending 4 years and still continuing their development, or putting that to the side and risking that and going for a professional opportunity. When you go to these lower league clubs, it's not like Real Madrid or Chelsea or Manchester United. The facilities aren't the same, but you are able to play professionally. You're able to dedicate your full 24 hours to your development, and you're also still playing games. You're getting recognized. You're getting professional experience amongst grown men. And personally, and not that I want to take anyone away from their studies or anything like that, but personally, I think the sooner you can start your development under professional guidelines, professional resources, professional facilities, for me, I think that's best, because NCAA, with all due respect, I don't think they follow the right criteria into producing a professional player. I'm sure there's a few schools or a few programs that may aid in really helping someone become professional or create a professional lifestyle. But I think on the most part, unless you're a part of the selected few schools, I do think going your own route and trying to find a professional opportunity as soon as possible, I think that's the best way.
Okay, so when you said you and your agent, you got a trial with that team in Germany, would you say, did you have a backup plan? Like, if that didn't work out, did you have another team you would go try out for? Or was that your, only option?
Yeah. To be quite frank with you, I had this mentality back then where you don't focus on a plan B, because if you focus on a plan B, you're allowing yourself to lose focus from your plan A. I don't think it's a very wise mentality, because you're kind of putting all your eggs in one basket, and sometimes not signing for a team has nothing to do with you. There could be things behind the scenes going on, financial issues with the club, visa problems, there's all sorts of other things off the pitch that can lead to you not signing for a team. But personally, for me, it was all in or all out. And thankfully it worked out, because if it didn't work out, who knows, you and I could not be having this conversation right now. But me personally, it was, I'm going to go. I sold my car at the time. I said goodbye to family and friends, and it was, I'm going to sign, and there's no going back. And I packed all my stuff and got rid of the stuff I didn't want. And for me, it was, I'm moving. It wasn't I'm just leaving for a certain amount of time. It was, I'm gone, and I'm gonna make it happen. And there's goods to thinking that way. There's positives, but there's also negatives as well. Because if it hadn't worked out, or if there was some sort of issue, then I wouldn't have something to fall back on.
Okay, so moving on as well, as you moved from America to Germany, would you say your experience in America was any different from your experience in Germany? Like, would you say as they're bringing younger players up, or as you're getting older, actually? So as it's kind of hard to judge because you're younger in America and then older in Germany. But from your experiences, would you say that it's any different in Germany from the way they treat you as they're bringing up professional
Right,
level players?
right. So, yeah, I think that's a very interesting question because I think in the United States, development is looked in a total different way than in Germany. And I think the peak of a player is at a different age in Europe to, for example, in the United States. I think the peak of a player in the United States comes around maybe, I would say on average 19, 20, even a lot at 22, because that's when the university ends and now they're breaking into a pro environment. Versus in Germany, you're already seeing at 16, 15 if someone has the potential to be pro. I mean, you have even younger than that. You have at 9 years old, you have at 5 years old. They're already seeing, okay, there's something here in this kid. I smell something. I see something. So the way they treat the young players and the value they put in young players, I think that's a very different thing from the United States to Europe. I mean, I think the United States is doing the right thing, and now they're producing so many young talents. But I just think at that moment in time, the value of a young player, 16, 17, 18, was viewed in a total different way in Germany than it was in the United States. And maybe now the United States has caught on to that, and that's why so many young players are coming from the United States. And I think it's just going to grow and grow and grow in the next decade or 20 years or so.
Yeah, so as you were joining this team in Germany, would you say that there was a lot of players that had like been with the club or in the academy since they were younger? Because I know like a lot of academies in Europe, kids join the academy from like you said, like 4 years old, 3 years old, and then they just play for that academy their entire life. Like Alexander Arnold for Liverpool, like he played with the academy since he was like really young. So would you say that it was harder to compete with the players in Germany who had played with the club in the youth academy since they were really young, or?
Yeah, a lot of the players had come from like the ranks, you could say. But also when it comes to the first team, the most important thing is results. I mean, this team wasn't in the top division, so every year these teams are trying to get promoted, to go up and up and up. So at the end of the day, it becomes more about results as well to development. I mean, development kind of takes what do they say? They kind of put it on the side because when it comes to the first team, you want your club to grow and get to the next division. So if a player doesn't have the quality to come to the first team, then you don't force that. But I definitely think when it comes to a foreign player, and we'll probably get into that later on in this interview, in this podcast, but I think when it comes to looking at myself and when I'm going to an overseas country, it's about bringing something else that they don't have there, if that makes sense. Bringing different qualities to the pitch, to the team, and just kind of not comparing myself to what they have, but bringing something totally different than what they have, so that it's not even in comparison to their own players. And by different, I mean a different style of play, different qualities, different approach to the game, different movement. I mean, it can become so more complex, but I would just say bringing something different to the game than what they have.
Okay, so you wouldn't say like any of the coaches or managers there like had any bias towards the youth players? Like you felt like it was pretty even competition? Like if you were good, then you would get the spot regardless if you had been with the club since a young age or not?
I know what you mean. I think personally, I mean, speaking on this staff at this time, I didn't see any bias at all. The coach was a former player from the Bundesliga and Bundesliga 2, so he was he came from a very knowledgeable background on football. He had a very good knowledge on football, and for me personally, I think he would put in the pitch who was best. But at the end of the day, certain clubs will favor young players because at the end of the day, if you have a player that belongs to you, that's come from a youth ranks, and you give him time at a professional level, it's going to increase their value. So you're able to then sell them, and their value is going to increase every minute they play at a professional level, at a senior level. But I would personally say at this club at this time, and with the German people, from my experience, I would say I didn't see any bias. I thought it was who deserves to be on the pitch, and who doesn't deserve to be on the pitch has to still put in some work, and once they deserve it, they would get their opportunity.
Nice. So moving on from Germany, where did you go after Germany? Like, did you trial for a different club, or did they like unsign you? Like, how did you move from Germany?
Yeah. So, when I went to Germany, as I told you earlier, I was moving. My plan was, okay, I'm gonna move up the ranks. I'm gonna start in this division, and I'm gonna move up and up and up and up until I'm in the Bundesliga. And when I arrived there, again, I didn't come from like a footballing background, so I didn't really know. But once I arrived, I realized, wait, there's hundreds of players here. There's hundreds and thousands of, there's thousands of players here, my age, trying to do the same thing as me. And it's not going to be so simple to just think that, okay, every year I'm going to move up the ranks and move up the ranks and move up the ranks. So at the time, I reflected on my experience in Germany after the season, and I thought, okay, I'm going to go somewhere else and get first division experience, and then I'm going to return to Europe and battle for something at a higher level. So I had the option to stay and extend my contract for another year, but I spoke to the staff and the sport manager, and they understood what I wanted. So I left. And then I went to Singapore, and I signed. At the time, it was called the S League, and now they've rebranded and they call the Singapore Premier League. So that's the top division in Singapore.
What team was that when you went to Singapore?
So that was Tampines Rovers Football Club. They're one of the or probably the most successful Singaporean football club in history. They appear in the AFC Cup, which is like the Europa League in equivalent of Asia to Europe. And I was there for duration of 1 season, 1 year.
And what team? So after the Tampines Rovers, did you move to a different team?
Yeah. So after I spent my time in Tampines Rovers. In Asia, there's a foreigner rule. So at that time, there was a 3 foreigner rule. 3 foreigners in a team, 3 foreigners on the pitch. So I was the 4th foreigner actually, and I didn't get my break necessarily. It was very sporadic, my time in Singapore. But it was a very good experience. I played with a lot of international Singaporean players, and I actually got a call up to the Singapore under-20s. So I had 2 appearances with the Singapore under-20 national team. There were 2 friendly games that I played with them, and after that, I realized with my goals and my objectives, it might be better to move on from Singapore at this moment in time. And then I went to the I-League in India. I spent about just about half a season there. I had some issues over there with management and some behind the scenes issues. So I had a 2-year contract, but I got out of my contract early and then flew back home to Australia.
So would you say all that moving around in that 5 years, would you say that helped you because you had experience in all these different countries, and then you got the chance to look back and see which countries you thought would help you the most and improve your career from what it was? Would you say all those experiences helped you, or would you say it didn't do much and you just didn't enjoy the moving around?
I think it definitely helped me. I think it definitely gave me ability to adapt. I mean, now I'm at a point where I can go anywhere, despite the language, despite the culture, despite the style of football, and I can adapt. I can work on myself to learn and to understand on the pitch and off the pitch and be able to adapt. I think that's a very good quality to have. But speaking football-wise, if I could go back, I would maybe say it's okay to move around a little bit, but maybe also focus on finding the right place and staying at the right place for the longest amount of time possible, and developing there, learning there, getting close to people that can help you, getting closer to them, and creating a good relationship with good people, and also on the pitch as well, adapting to one style of football and then exceeding in that same style of football.
So would you say, as you were switching between these teams, would you say that money had any influence on it? Or were you just focused on the level of play?
Me personally, I mean, even still to this day, I try and focus most of my development before the financial factor, because I'm still young. I'm still 22 years old. So for me, I think if you focus on the money, if you focus on the football, the money will come. But if you focus on the money, that football will never come. So I try to always focus on the quality of football, what's best for my future and my development as a player and person, and that money will later follow. Money will always come and go. So personally, for me, with all my previous experiences, it was for the most part, it was all based on what's best for my career and for my growth as a player.
So after your time in India, did you sign for a different team?
Yeah, so I went over. So I'm Australian, so I flew back to Australia. At that time, the transfer windows were closed, and Australia has a different season than most countries in the world. So I flew back to Australia. There was an individual there that I'd been in touch with for several years, an agent that I'd been in touch with for several years, and I was always planning to go back and work with him, and everything fell in the right place at that moment in time to finally pursue that option. So I flew back to Australia, and I contacted him and started working with him and training with him, and then he sent me on a few trials, and that's how it kind of started in Australia.
Okay, so that's really cool. Would you say that it always, since you were young, you've always wanted to come back and play for your home
Absolutely.
country?
I mean, I love Australia. I'm a proud Australian. I always want to give as much as I can to Australia. And it was a pleasure to, my father migrated several years ago to Australia, and to be able to go back now at a total different stage in my life and total different stage in my football and play professionally. Back in the day, I was just playing Australia in an oval, which is like a plain park with no goals. I was just playing there every day after school, and now to be able to go back to that same country and play as a job, it was an honor. It was great.
So would you say that all this professional teams, would you say that changed your view on soccer? When you were a kid, you said you loved the sport and you loved playing the game, but would you say with all these teams and all the experiences you've had at the top level, would you say that affected your view on the sport? Did it become more of a job than a hobby?
I mean, yes and no. I think, me personally, I love the game. I still love watching the game. I still love speaking about the game. I still think about the game. I still dream. Sometimes I sit down and I just dream. I just dream big stadiums. I dream big goals. I still have that mentality from when I was a child. But I also now understand that football is also a business, and that a player is a product, and that you need to take care of all sides of that, and that means going to the gym, eating right, sleeping right, and the player, myself being the product, having to take care of that product as best as I can. And yeah, I mean, for me, it's still, I play for the love of the game, but also it's a pleasure to be able to do what I love and get paid for it. Meet so many great people across the world, travel to all these beautiful countries, learn about new cultures, learn all these different styles of football. And yeah, it's due to football that you and I are speaking now, so it's because of the beautiful game that you and I are in talks right now. So, yeah.
Is in Australia? Is that your latest team?
No, so I spent a year in Australia. I spent a year in the National Premier League with two teams. I spent half a season with one team, Cornwall Rangers, and then the second half of the season, I went to Albion Park White Eagles. I spent a season there. Everything was well. But it wasn't it's not the top division in Australia. The A-League is the top division, and I was attempting to have a break in the A-League, but unfortunately it's difficult to go from the Premier League to the A-League. So I left, and with the help of some individuals, I came to France, and now I'm currently playing in France.
What team? So actually, before we get into that, how did you get your trial for the team in France? Was it your agent, or were you yourself going looking for these teams who finding an opportunity to break into different?
So for me, my goal was always to come back to Europe. I mean, after I left Germany and I saw different things, I realized because Europe, the football is the best. In my opinion, I think that's actually non-debatable. The football is best in Europe. So for me, it was always, for someone with my mentality, it was always to try and come back to play at the best countries in the world, the best styles of football in the world. So I worked with not exactly an agent, but like a manager that helped bring me to France. It was a work in progress for a period of time, but then I came here, had some trials, the whole process again, adapting to the country, trying to learn French and learn the style of football, then I ended up signing for a team, and here I am.
So as we mentioned before, you've played for all these different countries around the world. Would you say that there was ever a language barrier, or that you were just thrown into a different country, different cultures, and you had to learn the languages right then and there?
Yeah, so honestly, I've been just thrown in. I mean, in football, you just kind of never know things. Like one phone call, from when I was in the US to Germany, it was just an email, and 7 days later I was in Germany. So sometimes you don't have the opportunity to learn or to prepare yourself. It's just, I'm gone. I'm leaving tomorrow. I'm leaving this day. I'm doing that. And there's always been in Singapore, they speak English. In India, a lot of the people spoke English. Australia, obviously, they speak English. But Germany, I didn't speak a word of German at the time, and I had to try to learn. And French as well. I spoke no French when I arrived. I just knew how to say hello and thank you. And now I can, I wouldn't say I speak perfectly, but I can hold my own, as they say. Yeah.
So would you say, I already mentioned this before, but out of all the countries you've played for, would you say there was one country that stood out, or one country that you had the best experience at with the players and the managers? And was there also another country where you felt they mistreated you, that you felt you could have been better and you could have progressed in your career there, but they just didn't?
Thankfully, I've had good experiences, good experiences everywhere I've gone. Of course, in football, there's always things that don't go your way, or you'd want them to go a different way, or you and managers have different points of views. But that's football. That happens from Real Madrid to Bayern to every level, to probably a local team in I don't know, in China. Who knows? So I think that's football. But in regards to my experiences, everywhere has different goods. I'll specifically speak, for example, France. France for me is very interesting because they have everything. They have strong, big players. They have technical players. They have intelligent players, and I think that's why they are such a strong national team, because they have that combination of different nationalities, different origins, and they've put it into this one national team. And that's what I find super interesting about France. But then Australia, they're very strong physically. We're animals on the pitch. We're workhorses. We can run up and down. The United States, they're very in tune with sports science and nutrition and gym programs and things like that, where it makes them unique. So everywhere has something different, which has also helped me in a way to be able to implement all these different components of football into myself. But when you asked if there's somewhere where I still would like to go back and I feel like I have more to give, I definitely want to return to Australia one day and play in the A-League. That's something, hopefully, if everything goes well in the future, I can accomplish and give a good go in my home country. When the time is right.
Yeah, so as you said, you pretty much already mentioned this, but you want to go back to the Australian A-League. As you're playing in France right now, would you say you have any plans for the future? Are you gonna stay with the club until your contract ends, or are you gonna try for different teams?
Yeah, so at this moment in time, I'd like to play in France. I'd like to remain in France. I think that's best for my development, and I'm very happy here. In regards to the country, in regards to, I have a few very good people around me here that help me, and haven't been able to find people this good anywhere in the world. So I would love to stay here and work alongside these people and try to develop myself as a person and player here. My plan is to stay here as long as possible. And the thing with Australia is I'm Australian, so that option, if I have the level, it will always be there because I don't need to worry about the foreign rules or anything like that. So I believe staying and working on my ability is only just increasing the chances and increasing my value to one day return and represent in the A-League.
Well, so moving on from football, would you say that your experiences of the cultures of all these different countries, would you say that also had an impact on the way you played?
Yeah, I think every country, the way the people are plays a factor into their football. For example, in Germany, people are very organized and organized and well spoken, and everything is supposed to be a certain way, and that also translates into their football. They're very tactical. Everything is done perfectly on time to the T, and I've been able to not only learn things from their culture, but also been able to implement things I've learned from their culture into my game. So, I think that's one benefit that some players don't have. Some players can stay in one country their whole life and they've never been out of their comfort zone. But me, my whole career has been out of my comfort zone, because even when I return to Australia, I'm not seen as an Australian because I've been away from Australia. So I always have this pressure on me, this just chip on my shoulder, this pressure that, okay, eyes are on me. What's this guy going to do? This guy that played here, here, and here. And I think that's a positive, because I'm able to learn things when I go to places, but also be able to, use these things that I've been fortunate enough to learn and then implement them into my life and into my game.
So reaching back all the way to the Seattle Sounders and even further back, would you say that you've made friends that you've kept in touch with, or you've made friends that you lost touch with because you've been moving around?
Yeah, I think a true friend, the distance doesn't matter. You're able to stay in touch despite the distance. That's like you yourself with your family. If you left and you came to France today, you would still be in touch with them. I think you definitely do lose in touch with some people, but usually when you're able to establish a strong bond while you're with them, then luckily with technology you can still remain in touch, FaceTime, phone calls, things like that. But absolutely, because of football, I have a lot of my all of them. I mean, other than my family, it's because of football. All my closest people to me, football's been able to open those doors for me. So yeah, I have several friends that I haven't seen in years, but I'm very close to them despite the distance.
So as you were growing up and as you were progressing in your career, would you say that support from certain people or certain players around you, would you say that really like helped you perform in that?
Yeah,
aspect
absolutely.
Of the game?
I think the people around you is the most important thing. I think that's even more important than what you can do on the pitch. I think it's the people around you that protect you, that give you good guidance, good advice, healthy, positive advice. I think that's very important. And I've been blessed. I have an individual in France. I have two individuals in France that, like I said earlier, that I would not be here without them. They play a huge factor in my development on and off the pitch. And yeah, everywhere I go, there's been someone that's been put in my path, that's been able to help me. It's always difficult to thank one person because so many people have played a part, from my family to then coaches to staff members to teammates to friends. So many, and as much as I can speak about my mentality and me, I have to thank those people and dedicate everything that I have, all things that they've been able to protect me from, things that I don't have, which were bad for me. All credit goes to those people.
Well, I think we've covered your whole career so far. Is there anything that you'd like to add on that you think that?
Yeah, no, I think that's perfect. I think it's I looked into your profile, and I think you're on your way to grow a successful podcast, and it's a pleasure to be one of your first guests on the podcast. And no, it was a pleasure. It was a pleasure speaking to you. I think if there's any young players listening, I would just encourage them to continue with their goals, continue dreaming, continue working hard, and keep faith, and everything will work out in the end.
Well, moving forward, good luck in your career. I hope everything works out great. And
thank you very much. Pleasure.
Hopefully I can have you back on in a future episode, and we can
absolutely, it'll be a pleasure. Thank you very much, my friend. All the best.